Madison Deming.
Krish Lingala.
Irina Huang.
This book was printed on ordinary paper, published in ordinary places, and written by ordinary people. However, this book is far from ordinary. It contained 81 extraordinary words that comprised one extraordinary definition. This definition fueled a debate that continues even today, the debate over homosexuality.
The DSM-2, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, was used by the American Psychiatric Association, or the APA, to list the mental disorders that exist. Because of its credibility, its definition of homosexuality was accepted universally.
Under Section 302, homosexuals were partially defined as, quote, ill primarily in terms of society and of conformity with the prevailing social milieu, unquote.
The mindset and definition of homosexuality as a disease were accepted by psychiatrists and everyday people as well, justifying the position of homosexuals as pariahs of society.
The debate over the redefinition of homosexuality in the early 1970s was one that would remove justification for homosexual discrimination at all levels of society. This was a major success for the movement, but a failure for those who believed that cure was possible.
No vice, no degradation.
The 81 words that held back the movement and fueled the debate.
Have you seen this article? Homosexuality has been removed from the list of mental diseases. It's about time the APA realized that homosexuality isn't a disease.
Well, I think it's a shame. Psychiatrists were giving homosexuals an opportunity for happiness.
That's ridiculous. Even renowned psychiatrist Sigmund Freud said that not only psychiatrists don't know a cure, but that homosexuality is no vice and no degradation.
But he left the possibility for a cure open.
A consequence of that belief was that psychiatrists continued to search for a cure to a disease that didn't exist, and this led to endless discrimination. Do you remember the Red Scare?
Yes, when everyone was afraid of communist espionage.
Well, the Lavender Scare was a similar type of hysteria. In the 50s, suspected homosexuals were fired because of the possibility that they could be blackmailed by the communists. Former chairman of the Republican Party, Guy Gabrielson, said,
Perhaps as dangerous as the actual communists are the sexual perverts who have infiltrated our government in recent years.
Wouldn't firing homosexuals be the only way to prevent any threat?
Don't you remember Professor Smith? He was fired because of his suspected homosexuality, but do you really think that he was being blackmailed by the communists in our own school?
Now that's another argument. He was a threat to the heterosexuality in the youth he was teaching.
The belief that homosexuals are a threat to heterosexuality is a common misconception, and now that the definition's been removed, people can't justify that kind of discrimination.
The APA never supported discrimination. Legitimate studies show that homosexuals are disturbed.
Those studies were rendered obsolete over 15 years ago when Evelyn D.
Yes,
Hooker...
Evelyn D. Hooker's experiment supposedly supported the idea that homosexuals aren't diseased.
Roger, it's Evelyn. Listen, I had homosexuals and heterosexuals take psychological tests. Psychiatrists couldn't identify the homosexuals. This means homosexuals are no different from heterosexuals.
Hooker's study was an important success because it showed that gays aren't diseased, and they could use the studies to support their arguments.
You seem to be forgetting the fact that even homosexual psychiatrists disregarded her work for years and continued to believe it was a disease. These gay psychiatrists formed a group called the Gay PA.
I wish we could just be out with it, you know?
But we have a disease.
And saying it's a disease was actually seen as progress at first.
Why?
Well, if it's a disease, then the church can't say it's a sin. But it's actually a failure because of the oppression it justifies.
No, but everyone in the APA believes it's a disease, and we have to as well.
I guess you're right. As long as we're gay, we're going to be silenced.
They had been taught that way for years. Their entire mindset was based on the APA that supported a cure for them.
The APA's position was based on sound research by distinguished psychiatrists such as Irving Bieber and Charles Socrates, and gay protesters aren't qualified to dispute them.
It was the gay protesters who could see through the faulty research and stand up for themselves. They had to be harsh, because for too long, they had protested quietly.
Regardless, they went too far. They threatened psychiatrists and screamed profanities at Dr. Irving Bieber and the APA panel in San Francisco.
I'm Dr. Irving Bieber, and my studies have clearly shown what causes homosexuality. Close-minded mothers often help lead to homosexual tendencies by thwarting relationships with fathers. This lack of a male influence can cause a later desire for male contact in life. Because homosexuality is not genetic, we can reverse these effects.
You think you can, but all you do is torture us. I was forced into a psychiatric hospital for reparative therapy when my mother found out I was a lesbian. They would show me pictures of women, and then they would shock me. And and when they showed me pictures of men, they would stop.
You are the pig who makes it possible for the cops to beat homosexuals. You call us sick and create the torturous curse forced onto us.
I've read your book, Dr. Bieber, and if you talked about black people the way you talk about homosexuals, you'd be drawn and quartered, and you deserve it.
After more protests the next day, gay activist Larry Littlejohn convinced Dr. Kent Robinson to set up the first official APA panel with homosexual members.
Robinson was successful. However, major arguers in favor of reparative therapy were not in attendance, a consequence of the violent methods of the protesters.
Tonight, Frank Cameron is here to speak with us. Frank?
What we are dealing with is a sociological problem of prejudice, not an illness. The person who really needs the psychotherapy is not the young homosexual, but his mother, who drags him into a psychiatrist's office. She needs to relieve her anxieties so that her son may live a fulfilling life.
Homosexual activists Barbara Giddings and Kayla Hewson convinced Dr. John Fryer to speak in an APA panel. However, he insisted on wearing a Richard Nixon mask and altering his voice to protect his identity.
I am a homosexual. I am a psychiatrist. People like me must know our place. We're diseased, they say, yet many of us work tirelessly to protect institutions that would chew us up and spit us out if they knew the truth. We must use our skills and wisdom to help opposers of our cause, and us, grow to be comfortable with that little piece of humanity called homosexuality.
The APA was unaware that gay psychiatrists existed, but finally, the stage was set for gay activist Ronald Gold to ask Dr. Robert Spitzer for a chance for homosexuals to take a stand against the Committee on Nomenclature.
Spitzer organized a 1973 meeting in Honolulu conclusively named, "Should Homosexuality Be in the APA Nomenclature?" Charles Socarides and Ronald Gold had one last debate.
If a child has a bad relationship with his father, he can find a new father figure or reconcile the relationship. Homosexuals also have a choice. He can either accept his unhealthy relationships with other men or reconcile his inborn heterosexuality. To allow one's homosexuality to thrive is to betray one's mammalian heritage.
The few homosexuals you've cured are like the few people who have won the lottery.
Ron, I'm trying to help you.
I don't need help. It's impossible to cure a disease if it doesn't exist. To be viewed as diseased in our society is to be made a second-class citizen. Homosexuality isn't damaging, but being called sick is. This isn't about science, it's about politics and prejudice. It's time to take the damning label of sickness away from us. Take us out of your nomenclature.
That night, Robert Spitzer went to a gay PA meeting where a military psychiatrist fell into Ronald Gold's arms, thanking him for giving him the courage to come out after his moving speech.
So that convinced Spitzer to write his resolution, right?
Right. He came up with a definition stating that mental illnesses have to cause people distress, and homosexuality doesn't necessarily do that.
So by adding a definition, he took away a definition.
That's exactly right, and on December 15th, 1973, it was officially removed. The APA president now urges that homosexuals be given all protections guaranteed to other citizens.
But isn't a large consequence that psychiatrists can't help people disturbed by their homosexuality?
Homosexuals can be happy, but some psychiatrists are still searching for a cure.
Then I suppose the debate continues.
The DSM was printed on ordinary paper, but its extraordinary contents provided for massive debate. The next DSM changed, as did the official view towards homosexuality and the field of psychiatry.
Psychiatrists started using medicinal cures due to the failures they encountered from personal therapies. Meanwhile, Dr. Socarides argued that the AIDS epidemic was a consequence of the removal.
As Frank Kameny said, the entire gay movement was going to stand or fall upon whether homosexuality was a sickness, and the movement stood tall.
No longer did anyone have scientific evidence to say that homosexuals were not fit to hold jobs, be parents, or be in love.
The removal of 81 harmful words propelled the gay movement, and homosexuals were one step closer to reaching equality.